Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Appalachian Community Innovation Center's program webinar, where we will be discussing the newly funded program eligibility and the application, evaluation, and awarding process. Before we begin, please note that this training is being recorded. Keep cameras off and microphones muted, and we will be using the chat feature for questions. Feel free to ask questions in the chat throughout the webinar with the understanding that we will likely answer most questions at the end. If your question is time sensitive, put it in the chat and we will address it as quickly as we can. If you would like to access the recording and presentation slides after the webinar is complete, they will be available online. Today's presenters are Paul Mann, Chief of Finance, and Jeff Westhoven, Chief of Program Services at the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, also known as OFCC. Antonia Gibson, Financial Program Manager of the Ohio Grants Partnership with the Ohio Office of Budget and Management, also known as OBM.
All right, so we'll get started. We'll start with today's agenda. So for the Appalachian Community Innovation Grant Program, today we're going to go over the background and where this program came from, the eligibility, because you don't want to be applying for this grant unless you're eligible, and we want to make sure you don't waste your time. We'll also discuss the application process and walkthrough. The applications on the Ohio Grants portal, and we'll walk you through that process to make sure you're comfortable with that. We'll also discuss the evaluation and award process that we will go through to ultimately award these grants. And lastly, we will go through some helpful resources that we have that you can use to help you in your application process. Can you go to the next slide, please? All right, so let's start off with what are community innovation centers. So these are facilities or centers that provide access to three crucial services: community health services, public education, and workforce development. And there was a need that was identified for these crucial services in the state at large, but specifically for Appalachia. Next slide. So a little background on where this program came from. So it's part of the American Rescue Plan Act. The state of Ohio applied for funding with the U.S. Treasury to provide grant programs that are helpful post-pandemic. So over nearly $180 million for broadband, and then an additional $85 million specifically for the Appalachian community in this grant program. And this $85 million is in addition to the $500 million Appalachian Community Grant Program that the Ohio Department of Development is overseeing. So a lot of investment in the Appalachian community. Next slide. So this slide really explains the who is eligible and the who in the where. So as far as the who and who is eligible, if you are a K-12 school district, a JVSD, if you're a regional council of government or other political subdivision, you are eligible. And there are other entities that are eligible, which we'll discuss on the next slide. So that's the who, and in the where is as a eligible applicant, you must be one of the 32 Appalachian counties. So it's not enough just to have a project in Appalachia. To apply, your entity must be located in Appalachian communities. Can you go to the next slide, please?
Paul, I do have a quick question that I thought I would
Yeah,
ask you from the chat.
sure.
Someone asked, is the development of a latchkey program at a public school eligible for funding?
So a latchkey program, so it would need to provide those three services: healthcare, education, and workforce. Uh, I didn't grow up going to Latchkey, so I don't know all the ins and outs of Latchkey. But if the Latchkey program includes those three services, it would be eligible. Do you have any other questions before we go to the next slide, Annalise?
No, there is a little bit of an issue with the audio cutting out a little bit,
Okay.
but it might just be the internet, maybe a little
Yeah,
bit of an internet issue, but we can mostly hear you, so I think it's okay.
okay. I stepped a little closer to my computer and I can project a little more if I need to.
Okay.
And I'm happy to repeat anything out. And Annalise is asking questions throughout if needed, but then there will be questions at the end. And I saw a chat just come in. So it's like an agency must hit all three of those components. And the answer is yes. You can't just have healthcare, you need healthcare, workforce, and education. And then, yeah, more questions, but we can answer those at the end. And some of these questions will be answered as we go through. So this slide speaks of eligible lead applicants. And in order for this program to be a success, we are investing money to build facilities. But in order for those facilities to operate, to be able to provide those services, partnerships are really crucial for success to ensure that the entity has the finances to be able to continue those services and the personnel to continue those services. So there will be multiple partners working, but one applicant needs to be identified as the lead applicant, and only the lead applicant will apply, but they'll provide information related to partners. So eligible lead applicants are local units of government or government-related entities, educational institutions, and nonprofits. I heard on the chat public institutions eligible. They would be considered educational institutions, so yes. And if you are a nonprofit, you'd also be eligible. And then, like I said on the last slide, an eligible lead applicant must operate in the project must occur within the 32 county Appalachian region. Next slide. And in this slide just lists some examples of eligible lead applicants. So if this includes you, you're in the right place. Townships, villages, cities, school districts, libraries, county governments, community improvement corporations, councils of government, higher education, and nonprofits. Next slide, please. So we touched on this a little bit already, but what type of projects are eligible? And these are construction projects. And these are construction projects for facilities and or campuses that combine the three components that we discussed before: education, health monitoring, and workforce. And it could be a new build. It could be a renovation of existing facilities. It could be a renovation and expansion. But the important thing is that it provides all three of those services: education, health monitoring, and work. Next slide. So as you're thinking about applying for this grant program, we wanted to provide you with some key financial considerations for you to know upfront. So first, the first two bullet points really go. So from a local match perspective, there is no local match requirement. So the funding for this grant program can cover 100% of the construction costs. However, there will not be any budget amendments. No additional federal or state funding will be available to cover cost overruns. So if there are cost overruns, that's when local funding would be needed to be able to cover those cost overruns. Next, from an administrative expense perspective, the good news is grant administration costs are eligible for reimbursement. And that could include personnel costs for administrative employees. It could be the accounting office, legal folks, a project manager helping oversee the construction of the facility. But those are administrative expenses for building the facility. So operating expenses are not covered. Continuing from providing the services after the facility is built. And with those administrative expenses for personnel expenses, you have to make sure for federal requirement purposes that you have evidence of both time and effort. And those administrative expenses are outside of the $85 million grant funding. We have $5 million for admin expenses, and that's admin expenses for our OFCC's admin expenses, as well as those who are receiving grants. So when you submit an application, you need to make sure you include costs for design, construction, any site preparation costs, contingency, but don't include administrative expenses. Those will be paid out separately. And then lastly, just related to the disbursement of funds, we aren't going to be providing the funding upfront, but rather as you incur expenses, you submit those expenses to us, whether they're admin expenses or project expenses, and then we will reimburse you. And the plan is for that to be on a monthly basis. So you need to have some cash flow to be able to cover those expenses in the meantime. And that ends my portion of the webinar, and I'm going to kick it off to Jeff Westhoven, and he's going to go through the application process.
All right, thanks, Paul. And so far we've covered background and eligibility. We're going to go through application, the evaluation, and award of the grants. And I hope everybody can hear me. I know there was some audio cut out on the last few minutes, so I hope you can hear me okay. And we'll be, I see a lot of questions in the chat. If we don't get to those as we're speaking, we will try to address those at the end. So keep them coming, that's fine. And then maybe some of the slides we have later will address some of those questions. We're going to talk about how to apply. And actually, Tanya Gibson is going to take us through screenshots of what it actually looks like on the Ohio Grants portal to apply. We're going to tell you first what you're going to see, then you're going to see it, and then we'll review what you saw. So tell you what you're going to see it, then tell you what you saw. So that's the goal. First, on applying, this is all through the Ohio Grants partnership at grants.ohio.gov. If you haven't already done so, you would need to get a unique login through the state's identity management system. That's Ohio OHID. And the website is here for those who haven't done that already. We can go on to the next one. There are also some, before you start, it's good to consult some of these resources. These are going to be available both through our website and then also through our website and also on the Ohio Grants partnership. As you apply, you'll be able to see those as well. So those both places. Program guidelines, application instructions, which will walk you through the questions. Also, you know, some people might want to see the whole application first before downloading it and applying. So there is actually a full sample application on our website. This is a graphic that shows it here. Again, it's just for information purposes only, but you'll be able to see all the questions that we will be asking. If you have questions about the application, there's a question answer process, and those questions answers will also be on the website. And we've also provided a scoring rubric, which tells you what we are interested in when we evaluate and score the proposals, the applications. Okay, on the next slide, again, after you've established the login, you can start the application process online at the Ohio Grants Partnership. The application is broken up into really three sections, if you will. The first part is just identifying who the applicants are. So this is your chance to tell us who you are, who's the lead, who your partners are. That identifies who's applying. The next section are a series of kind of like screening questions, check boxes. There's 8 of them, I believe. Some of the questions will be, for example, what's the grant amount that you're requesting? Does your project include all 3 elements, yes or no? So those are the easy ones. And those you'll answer directly on the Ohio Grants portal in the application. The next series of questions are scored. These are narrative. There are 9 of them. And to answer these, you'll download basically a PDF document, and you'll be able to fill that in the document, then upload it back into the system. And Tanya will show you how that works. We can go on to actually what the scored questions will look like on the next slide. Oh, I should mention, for each of those questions, we give hints essentially on what we're looking for. It'll say a desirable response to this question includes, and it'll say, for example, consider this or share this information. So that gives you a sense of what we're looking for and how we'll score that. Again, if you have questions about the application, feel free to ask those through. We have a dedicated email box, appalachia@ofcc.ohio.gov. If you ask questions through there, what we will do is kind of remove the identifying information of whoever asked it. We will answer the question, post that, and that'll be on the website. And we'll try to get those, typically we try to get those done within 2 business days. So every time you post it until we get the responses up there. So that's the way to ask questions on the application. Okay, so now to go through the actual, just a sample what those 9 questions will be. We'll go to the next slide. The first 3 questions are what you consider to be the construction questions. What is the scope of the project? What's the budget? What's the schedule? And that's an opportunity to share those things with us. In many cases, it's desirable to have engineers or architects estimate for those things. It's not a requirement, but it is desired. So the first 3 construction questions. The next 3 questions are related to the 3 elements of the program: education, healthcare, and workforce. And we can go on to the next one to show you the question 6, workforce. This is essentially your chance to share what the need is in these 3 areas in your community and to explain how your project addresses that need. So here's the need, here's the desired outcome, here's the gap, here's where our project addresses it. So that's those 3 questions. The 7th question is related to project viability financially. After the project is built and we're looking at a planning horizon about 5 years, how will the project continue to be sustainable financially? For example, will there be fees? Are there sources of local funds? Is the community considering a levy to support it? So those are the kind of things that you'd want to include in your plan on how the project will continue to be financially sustainable. The last 2 questions are federally required related to ARPA funds. Question 8 is the project's relevance to COVID-19. And essentially this question is, explain how the project is designed to address a need that resulted from, or was made apparent by, or was exacerbated by COVID-19. This is your tie-in to the COVID-19 pandemic. And then the final question, narrative, is how the project fits a critical community need. You would have kind of already answered this in some respects in questions 4, 5, and 6, but this is a way to maybe highlight one of those needs, how the project really fills that need. And those are the scored questions. Next, I think we're going to Tanya to go through the walkthrough. And this is just a screenshot of what it looks like when you go to the Ohio Grants portal. There's lots of funding opportunities there. She's going to take us to our little happy place, which is the Appalachian Community Innovation Grants Program, and show us how that works. So Tanya, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Jeff. So now we get a chance to look at some of the pieces that Jeff was talking about. Next slide, please. So once you get the Ohio ID, actually some of you may already have it, most of you probably have it. If you've done any work with the state of Ohio, you probably do. You'll go to our Ohio Grants Partnership portal and you'll see funding opportunities at the top. And that's where you're going to first click in to get to the opportunity. Next slide, please. And there's a couple of different ways you can find it. You could just scroll through everything that's available, but a quick search for the School Facilities Commission inside the search box will get you right to where you need to be. And you can see the underlined red opportunity right there. You'll click right into that. Next screen, please. So here's the first page where you'll get, at the top of this page, you'll get a lot of information just about the total funding available, where the money is coming from, et cetera. But I highlighted this area because at the bottom it's real important. Like Jeff was saying, you could access the documents before you get into the application to prepare yourself for what you're going to need to include, also the scoring rubric and instructions, guidance. You could download all that from this page. You can also download the secondary criteria, which is the questions that Jeff went through, the 9 questions. If you'd like to go ahead and get that ready, you can download that at this page. But once you're prepared to start the application, you click this apply for the funding opportunity box in the bottom right, and we'll see what the application looks like in the next screen. First, we'll just need some organization information. Your supplier lookup, if you want to click into that, you can type in the name of your organization and you'll be able to auto-populate a lot of this information. But this is just the basics, address, where you're located, etc. Next screen, please. 2 things that you're going to need for this application: the unique entity identifier, the UEI, and also your taxpayer ID number, your TIN number. Those are 2 things that you'll need once you get into this application. I'm going to show you something here too on this screen, and this will be on other screens, is you're going to save at any point with these save boxes at the bottom right, and that will allow all your information to stay. And I'll show you at the end of the application screens, I'll show you where you can save that so that you have a draft, but that's important for each screen that you go onto. Next slide, please. Contact details. So here's where you're going to identify people that we can get in touch with if there's any questions about the application. This is also the list of people who would get notifications about any reporting that's due. And a highlight here that I made note of is to be sure to check mark who will be working on the financials and doing the quarterly reports. You can click everyone. You can click just one person. For example, if you're a school, you might have your superintendent on one contact line, CFO on another contact line, treasurer. You also might have a grants person dedicated to running this program. You could put that person on here. But if they're not check marked, when they get a notification about their reporting, they won't be able to get in and report. So it's an easy fix. Just wanted to give you a heads up on that. And you can also add, you'll see in this green box in the bottom right, you can add any additional contacts that you'd like to see on there. Next slide, please. These are the questions that Jeff was talking about, which will give us some general information about your project. Total dollar requested, where the location will be for the project. We'll also get some information about all of the entities that are involved with the program. If it's a library, school district, you'll just click all of them that apply so that we make sure we understand who are the collaborators on this project. Then there's the other questions like, will the project serve unmet community needs and healthcare? You're going to talk about whether or not you have support already with resolutions. You can also give us just a quick yes or no if you have cost estimates and all that already prepared. So this is just a general area for some of the quick questions. And again, you'll save that. Right now it says form incomplete because it's not, the answers aren't there, but when you answer all of that, you fill in the pink, you'll get a save option. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we're getting back to the documents that you need, which you might have already downloaded, but also the this section where you've downloaded the secondary grant criteria questions, the 9 questions that are narrative in nature, this is where you're going to be able to upload that. So you'll have that downloaded, you'll answer your questions, and then you'll upload it here on this screen. Next slide, please. And here's just a quick look at that narrative, that Word document that you can download. You can take, question 1, you can just click into the enter text here box and answer everything there. You could just set your own Word doc and then answer everything. Just be very clear about which questions you're answering in that Word doc. But this is just what it'll look like once you download that. Next slide, please. And then you'll get to the end of the application. And if you have, you'll agree to basic, I'm the one who completed this, and we understand that we'll be agreeing to terms and conditions, and then your signature. But you'll notice in the bottom right, you will have an opportunity to save this as a draft if you're not prepared to submit at that moment, which is good because once you go back in, you'll be able to access everything you've already saved on all the other pages. So once you're ready to submit, though, this is where you do it. And I think that's it for my section. Next slide. Yep, I think I'll turn it back over to Jeff.
All right, thanks, Tanya. And some of you may have already completed other grant applications through the grants portal. It's pretty intuitive, but if you have any questions, again, feel free to submit those through our inquiry process. Your next question may be, when is all this happening, right? So here we are today on the second row of this at the webinar. The applications are due March 21st, and that means the inquiry period closes 3 days earlier on March 18th. And the reason for that is with a 2-day turnaround, some of the questions we want to be able to give you an answer prior to the applications being due. Now, as far as how it goes after that, it really depends upon how many applications we receive. But we hope to have the evaluations largely concluded in May, with the award notifications later in May and the grant contracts executed by the end of June. Of course, the grant contracts being executed often depends upon locally. You may have to get your own board resolutions, or your own entities would need to approve it. So it allows us some time for that. That is generally the application timeline. Again, that depends largely on how many applications we do receive. Okay, next slide. After the application window closes, we will, as a team, we have a team reviewing these. We'll go through the screening questions, and all those that pass the screening will go into the evaluation committee. We have a team of OFCC plus 6 different state agency representatives. And if you remember those 3 elements, we have education questions. So we have representatives from Department of Education and Workforce and Department of Higher Education to help us with those. For the workforce related questions, we have Jobs and Family Services and Development helping us. And then for the health related questions, the Department of Health and the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. So those state agency reps will be helping us on those questions. In addition, for those that get far enough in the process on the construction questions, we have construction consultants that can do kind of what we call reasonability estimates on the construction to make sure that the scope corresponds to the budget that's requested and corresponds to the schedule that is in the application. There may be clarifications after the application window closes. So for example, let's say in your response, there are 2 somewhat conflicting answers, and we as the evaluation committee don't know what the right answer is. We may reach out to the grant contact and ask, page 3 says this, page 4 says this. Which of those are the 2 that you want us to consider? So that would be clarifications. I should mention that clarifications is not an opportunity to additionally compete or submit additional information to enhance an application. It's meant to simply clarify what was submitted on the application deadline. And I mentioned at the bottom here, budget and schedule validation. Again, we'll take a look for reasonableness for the budget and schedule. Okay. And then on to next slide. And so as you'd expect, the highest scoring applications are the ones that would be recommended for award. We will notify all applicants, both the ones that are awarded and non-awarded, of the outcomes. And then after that, we get into the contract execution phase. And of course, a lot of that depends upon the timing with the number of applications we do receive. Okay. Next slide. All right, so resources, we're kind of towards the getting towards the end here. So our website is a great resource. It will have, we can go to the next one, just a screenshot of it. From here, if you go to OFCC and then go to grants, this is the first of the grant programs that will appear. You can actually apply through the launch button here. You can submit questions. You'll see on there it has the mailbox. You can also submit questions to the Office of Budget Management if you have questions about, let's say, the federal funding, federal procurement guidelines, federal reporting. Since they do that for all the ARPA funds across the state, they're a good resource for those. Also, towards the bottom of this website is where those resources are I mentioned. And you can go one more slide. It'll show what the bottom looks like. And here's where you'll see the guidelines, application instructions, the actual questions, the scoring rubric. Oh, also the terms and conditions, which didn't mention. So that's the part of the condition of award, the terms and conditions. We have a media release. And then at the conclusion of the webinar today, we will also put as an additional bullet here, this webinar, the slides, and then a recording will be also posted here. So this is a good place to go for all that information. Next slide. Okay, so what we did today is cover the background, eligibility for the program. We did a walkthrough of how to apply, talked about how the applications will be evaluated and awarded, and then also mentioned some of the resources where you can get additional information. And with that, I think we are into the chat. So let's open up to our other presenters, Paul, also. And we've been answering some of the questions in the chat as we go. But let me let, I guess, Ann and Annalise help us organize the questions that we have. So.
Yes, so I'm looking at what questions have not been answered yet. I think the first one I see is, will the grant be eligible for projects where construction has already started? I don't know if either of you can speak to that.
We may have to take that one back to legal, because usually if construction's already started, it's already a funded project. Mm-hmm. And so there's also already funding resources for it. But there are cases, and this has probably come up, where let's say someone is building a project and with this funding, they would expand it further. Let's say they were going to be doing a school-based health center. So that's already happening anyway. And then they would want to add on the workforce part, and that would be additional construction. So that is possible, but I think that's kind of a case by case. Paul, do you have any other insights on that?
The only thing I would add is any costs that are incurred before the award are not eligible. So if you already have a construction project in the works, any money that's already spent would not be eligible.
Okay. And then let's see, I see some people have their hands raised in the chat, but we can't have any of the participants speaking for questions. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat. Let's see, I think this question was answered. Somebody asked if healthcare equipment is an allowable expense.
This we'll have to check again, but I think it has to be a fixture to the building. So these would be building expenses, not necessarily equipment that's not a fixture.
Okay. Somebody else asked, what types of projects is the OFCC looking for?
We are looking for projects that score high on the application process we just went through. So I know I hope that's not a flippant answer. So really, it's something that hits all three components and really fills an unmet need in that community. I mean, part of the real appeal for a program like this is to address those unmet needs in those three areas in one central location. And those that can best express that and tell that story those are the projects that we're looking for.
All right.
Thanks, Jeff. And I would just add, as a result of COVID, the American Rescue Plan Act was passed to provide funding to help the nation rebound from COVID. And there's some specific issues, specifically healthcare, education, and workforce, where it's like there could be additional services to be able to help with these areas. And what that looks like, it could look like a lot of different things. It could be kids are struggling from an education perspective. So there's a tutoring program, and there needs to be a facility where tutoring could be provided. It could be a health clinic that operates as say, similar to a minute clinic to provide healthcare to students and families. From a workforce perspective, it could be a computer lab where folks in the community can go to access the internet and apply for job opportunities, or being helped with resumes so they're able to get jobs. There could be a breadth of services that are provided at these facilities, and for them to really be a success for the community to want to go to those centers. It's important that there are wraparound services with a lot of partners to be able to help.
Great.
Yeah, I see a few questions related to award ranges or sizes of awards, if you will. I think there's a couple on that. What's the max? What's the minimum? There is no minimum, and I guess the max is $85 million. Please don't submit an application for $85 million, but there is no maximum. We really don't know how many applications we are going to get or what types of projects, so we did not set a maximum on that or a minimum. So I guess the guidance there is to make your case that the project you have is the right size to fill the needs that you are proposing. There is also a question on the application questions. So I just went to the website in the resources section. I was able to pull down what's called view application questions. So you may want to try to refresh your browser and see if that works. If not, for whatever reason you can't get it, please send us an email to conclusion at the Appalachia mailbox, and we can send you the attachment directly.
I see there's also,
sorry. Go ahead,
I was
Paul.
going to say, I see another question. Maybe this is the one you're going to mention, but the question is the education component aimed at K-12, or can it include adult higher education or technical school? The education component is K through 12.
And I don't know if this was covered or not, but someone was asking about for the medical side, is the goal to only provide behavioral or mental health care? Or are you looking for general health care or dental as well?
It can be any of those. It can be mental health, can be behavioral, can be general health. It can be, it could take the form of a medical office complex. It could take the form of an urgent care, minute clinic. Any of those are eligible. And again, it goes back to demonstrating that there's a need for that in that community, those particular medical services, and then showing that this particular facility will address that need.
Someone else asked if there is an organization that works alongside a public university for mental health programs. Are they eligible to apply for funding?
They would be eligible if they're in one of the 32 counties in Appalachia, and the facility will also be located in one of the 32 counties. Also, if they are in eligible applicant type. So we would need more information specifically, but if they are a nonprofit, they would be eligible. That's one of the eligible applicant types.
Someone else asked, could a healthcare facility along with a fitness center be okay for a K-12 educational site? Can this building be next to a sports complex?
As far as it can be next to anything, really, I think the question is the fitness side of it eligible? If that's the question. Someone had to make case that it was either, education or wellness, health. That'd be their case to make. But I mean, it wouldn't be obvious, but someone could make that in their narrative, and we would consider it.
Let's see, I'm looking for, I think the next question is, are resolutions from collaborators required, or are letters of commitment from organizations sufficient?
So we say in the application that those don't have to be submitted with the application. But as a condition of contract award, we would need to see commitments from all the parties. Now, the lead applicant is going to be the one that handles the financials essentially, and is our payee for the purposes of the grant. So they would have to have enough of a, I guess, sub-agreement that for us to be comfortable with that, and for the conditions, the federal award conditions, to pass down through those other entities. Paul, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
It's more the form. Yeah, the form of the commitment. We may bounce that off legal if you have something specific, but that's the intent of it, is that those federal requirements, sub-award requirements, flow down through to all the partners on the project.
Let's see, I think the next question I see is, could the funding be used to expand or complete an ARC grant that was funded?
Jeff, are you familiar with ARC grants? I'm not.
Yeah, I think we're the victims of our own acronyms now. We have plenty of acronyms here too, and so I think there's one that's maybe stumped us a little bit. If you could help us with that.
Let me, in the meantime, look for another question. I see another one was about, would a wellness center where adults can exercise be included? This person has no YMCA or gym in their community, so they're wondering about a wellness center for adults to exercise.
And Jeff touched on this before with related to a fitness facility, and it would be the same type of situation where the applicant would need to provide a narrative indicating how it fits with the education, health, and workforce requirements. It'd be their case to make, and it would be scored.
Right. Let's see. Someone asked, do construction contracts need to be awarded by September 30th, like with the ACGP, and are federal procurement standards required?
Okay, so Paul, on this one, so the September 30th does not apply to this funding source. There are different ARPA funding sources, so that does not attach to this one. Federal procurement does apply.
Correct.
And in most cases, for larger construction contracts, your local procurement requirements are going to be pretty structured and probably do fulfill it anyway. But they do have to follow federal procurement, and that typically includes some additional terms and conditions that will pass through to those construction and A&Es.
And there's also a question on Davis-Bacon and whether Davis-Bacon applies. And this is an issue with a little bit of nuance. So while the federal Davis-Bacon Act prevailing wage rate requirements do not apply, and that's if the project's funded solely by the Capital Projects Fund program. If there are other federal sources of funding, you have to follow the requirements of that grant funding. However, Treasury encourages recipients to ensure that capital projects incorporate strong labor standards, including project labor agreements and community benefits agreements that offer wages at or above the prevailing rate, and include local hiring provisions. And if you don't follow Davis-Bacon, there will be more robust reporting requirements. For simplicity, I'd recommend following Davis-Bacon, but it isn't required.
Right, I'm looking for, also, someone missed part of it, and just to clarify, for the education component, you did say that higher ed schools are not included in that, right? It's K through 12 schools,
They are included,
or
but they
they're,
need to provide education for K through 12 students.
okay, got it. Um, Someone asked about a farm to table program at a K through 12 school, including agricultural and nutrition education, where K through 12 students run the farm and the greenhouse. And there's workforce development on the agricultural side. And the construction would include the greenhouse, barn, office facilities. Would that be eligible?
You know, what's fascinating is that people have such creative ideas, and so this would be another case where you know, if someone has an idea like that, please submit it, and we'll consider it. It would be hard to say, I guess, just by the description, you know, offhand whether it's eligible or not. I mean, if someone makes the case that it fits within those three elements, we would consider it.
Okay. Some people in the chat also clarified that ARC is Appalachian Regional Commission. So I know that was one of the previous, someone was asking about ARC grants.
And Jeff, what I would say is we would need more information on the ARC grant. Even understanding the acronym is one portion of it, but we're not familiar with the specific program.
Now, if the general question is, you know, perhaps we have other funding sources, either through ARPA or elsewhere, and can we get another grant, essentially another ARPA grant to supplement or enhance that? If that's the general question, there's nothing precluding, I believe, in the grant awards that we couldn't add on to a project that's already happening. But the project that you're describing, your application has to be in effect a standalone. Whatever benefits it's accruing, it has to make the case that this investment with this fund, these new funds, will create this outcome, you know, maybe regardless of what the other grant is doing. So it'd be based on this as kind of a standalone, if you will. But as far as I know, there's no preclusion from having other sources of funds, federal, local, whatever the source.
Another question is an interesting one about would brown site reclamation be eligible for funds if the program is to be housed in a former factory, or, you know, on a polluted site? Would that be included in the funding or be eligible for funds?
Okay, so that's a construction question, and you know, site prep is eligible expense. Remediation is eligible expense. Now, what it would say is that depending on the cost, that could raise the cost of the project significantly, and then disadvantage it potentially from other projects that don't necessarily have that additional site cost. So it's just something to consider. You know, the state's going to be making an investment decision with these dollars. You know, what's the best benefit we can get for the buck? And so, you know, I would think cleaner sites would tend to have more of an advantage when it comes to the budget side. But perhaps, you know, there's other grants and things that could address that as well. It would be great for the project to do that as well. So I mean, it's a great, I guess, aspiration to be able to handle that too, in addition to this. But it doesn't preclude it from being a brownfield site, I would say.
And Jeff, what I would add is the schedule. The project needs to be completed by December 31st, 2026. So additional construction project intricacies that could prolong the schedule could impact
Another question I saw in the chat is, will there be partial awards, or is it all or nothing?
You'll see in the guidelines that we reserve the right to do grants in whole or in part. I would say our intent is, and it will really depend upon what we get in. However we award it, it probably won't come out cleanly exactly to a certain number of projects. So let's say you have $83 million in projects, and we have a $5 million project is the next one. So you're into the question of, how do you split that? So it could very well be a partial award, at least one. But I guess until we would see how the applications play out, it'd be difficult to answer that.
All right, and another person asked about if you could give some examples of services for public education K through 12.
So some of the ones you actually in the questions, I'm just looking at the desirable response here. It will say, for example, additional academic programs, extracurricular programs, social emotional development programs, internships, professional development programs. Those are all potential examples of things. But again, it probably goes back to whatever the educational need is in that community. And it's the program that would address that need is the one that would score well.
All right. I'm not sure if there's any other questions in the chat that I'm seeing that haven't been addressed. Oh, I just see there's just a new question. Someone asked if a project was submitted to build school-based health center/services in the original $500 million grant program, are you still eligible to apply for these funds?
Yes, being part of another program doesn't preclude them from also pursuing these funds.
And someone also asked again about whether higher ed counts as education, and as you said before, it does if they provide education also to K through 12 students. Is that correct?
That's correct, Annalise.
All right, so I think we might be caught up on the chat questions. I'm not sure if anybody has, oh, I see one more. Someone asked, are leveraged funds towards the project scored favorably?
That is a great question. And so I think if I understand it, someone has local funds that they're going to contribute, even though it's not a requirement. And so we would get a bigger project, perhaps with a greater reach. I would think it would, because the benefits that you're going to be accruing are going to be larger than if you didn't have those leveraged funds. It also may help you in the financial sustainability part if you have quite a bit of local participation. There's not a direct score that if you have so many local funds, there's a formula that we use. But I would think just thinking through how it's evaluated, that probably would help you because you get a greater outcome for the same amount of state funds invested.
And going back to the same person who's asking about whether higher ed counts as education, they said if their local university participates in CC Plus for high school students, does that meet the requirement?
I would ask, maybe we'll defer to Department of Education Workforce, but yeah, College Credit Plus is services to high school students. I would think it would, but let's verify that. And we can, some of these we can also put on the application Q&A, just so that for those that aren't here, they'll be able to see the question and answer, and everybody has access to the same information.
Mm-hmm.
In the specific facility that we would be investing money in, if you have a current facility and it offers that service and it's expanding, the funds would be used for, say, those expansion costs, and the expansion would need to provide those services. So it's not just that you're a entity that provides those three services, so it makes you eligible to participate. The facility that's built or the expansion needs to have those three services.
Someone else asked about, would the awarded entity be able to use this on a rented property?
Okay, so we do run into this same question on some of our other grant programs, and I guess I'll say how we address it on those. If someone is leasing long-term a facility, and then our improvements are going essentially to the owner, then there would need to be some sort of agreement on a culture we call it a non-disturbance and estoppel agreement, where the lessor cannot be, or the lessee cannot be removed for a period of at least, it'd probably be 5 or 10 years or whatever the length of the agreement is. That way, and here's the scenario. Let's say we were to improve a property for the entity that was leasing, and then their lease gets terminated, and so the owner accrues all the benefits. That's the situation we'd be trying to avoid. So there would need to be a longer term non-disturbance and estoppel agreement. We've also done it in our community schools grant program, where we have a restrictive covenant that's recorded on the deed to make sure it fulfills an educational purpose for a period of time. So I think out of the box, the answer would be yes, it is possible, but there would need to be legal assurances that the organization we're awarding to was in the property long-term to accrue the benefits.
And I'm seeing, I think there's one more question I noticed that I was a little bit confused by, but they asked, would it help if we can show how it will be sustainable after the project is completed? And they said this would be through JFS funding, partners, etc.
Yeah, that's in fact, of the questions that we have, you notice there's 9 questions. There's 8 5-point questions and 1 10-point question. And the 10-point question is financial sustainability. So it's obviously very important that the applicants show how they will continue to operate after the grant is spent. That would be great to show the case and show that local support. That would strengthen, I would think, that the answer to that question.
I also see another question. I think this is a good question. If multiple entities go in together to build the project, who would ultimately be the owner?
I think that would be up to the team to determine who would be the owner, who would want to be the owner. It would have to be one of the eligible entities, though. So it'd have to be a political subdivision or somebody that resided in that 32 county area. But I think it'd be up to the partners to tell us who would ultimately be the owner of the improvements.
Right. So I think it looks like I am not seeing any more questions, and we're just about done with the hour. So I think we can probably end here unless there's some last minute questions. And then also, we have, if you think of a question afterwards that you wish you'd asked, you can just, you can email one of these 2 emails here, either about the program itself or about the application portal, requirements, etc. So feel free to email any additional questions. And like we said, questions that we receive, we will be posting answers to questions we receive so other people can see the answers. So thank you everyone for attending, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.